80% of construction projects go over budget, and I'm going to use all my knowledge to make sure that you don't become that same statistic. My name's Doug, I'm the CEO of Mastt. Let's get into it. Alright guys, like and subscribe if you like the content, but here's what we're going to go through in today's video: how to create and monitor a project for you construction project management professionals. And in just a few minutes we'll cover heaps of stuff that you guys will become, totally awesome at this. So we'll cover why budgeting matters, 30 seconds, key components of a project budget, steps to create a project budget, reporting, we'll look at some examples, we'll have heaps of good stuff that you can take away, how to monitor and track, because it can get pretty wild. My 12 must-have metrics for accurate budget tracking and accurate budget reporting. And then, of course, final tips, free resources, and through the video, I'll show you where you can get all the free templates that you need so you don't have to start from scratch. So getting into it, why budgeting matters? Well, if you don't have the experience, you don't really know what to do, and things get complicated pretty fast. And there's a lot of costs in a construction project. So especially with real world, there's always these unexpected costs that come up. Things just generally take a long time. And so you want to be on top of this, and if I can share what I know, then hopefully you won't make the same mistakes. Benefits, we want to save money. That's number one. Budget overruns are the most common thing. 80% of projects go over budget, so let's make sure that doesn't happen to you or your clients. Avoid delays. We all want to look good as well. Let's make sure that we can do a good job and look pro in the process. And your stakeholders are going to love you if you implement some of the things you see today. And that might help you either get more money for your next project, or if you're a consultant, win more work. And so hopefully we can get those benefits for you. Now, two key components of a project budget, or number two, key components of a project budget. A lot of people will talk about direct and indirect costs. It's not really my style. I prefer the staged budget breakdown, and so that you have a budget bucket for each stage in the project's natural life cycle. So the first phase is planning, where you're doing some studies, maybe exploring permits, you're doing some preliminary costs on the back of a napkin. Then there's the design and procurement stage, where you're doing more developed detailed design, concept designs, schematic designs, different terminology depending where you are in the world, and you want to take your procurement. Then there's the construction stage, where you spend the bulk of the money, and then finally at the end a little closeout stage where you're tying things up, doing handover, getting all the documentation together, cleaning up the site. So they're the kind of four distinct stages. Some people have five. It doesn't really matter. Identify what works for you. And why I prefer this approach is, how can you really know what the stage is, what the budget is for that next stage, if you haven't completed the stage before it? Like, it's very hard to estimate the costs of the construction stage if you don't have a design, and it's very hard to estimate the costs of the design stage if you haven't done some initial planning. So start with the planning first, do it in this agile way, and there's a little guide here of what you can kind of expect bucket-wise for each of those budgets. Roughly 5% for planning, 10 to 20% for design and procurement, 60 to 70% for the construction phase, and then always good to have 10 to 15% set aside for a contingency bucket, just in case unexpected things happen, as they always do in the construction stage. And later I'll show you how you can do this in Mastt in a system for free. We've got all that stuff set up automatically. So how do you create a project budget? Well, first things first, you need to identify what you want and when you need it. So the deliverables, any timeline constraints, think about user requirements, functional requirements. For example, if you're doing a school, maybe you need classrooms for 30 people, for 15 people, maybe you need a recreation center, maybe you need some other amenities. List out your requirements, get it together, because that will enable a good planning stage to feed into the design stage. And it's really important to note that at this kind of early stage planning, that's when you have the most influence over the cost of the construction stage. as we progress through the project and we commit more time and effort and we narrow in on a design and eventually we get to the start of construction, you actually have a much, much smaller window to influence that total cost of the project overall. So just bear that in mind. This is the stage of high influence for what that project total cost will be. So just keep that in mind. Let's make that super small. Step 2, once you kind of know what you want, engage some architects, designers, engineers, or other professionals that will help you get maybe a concept design together, bringing together all of your requirements so that you can then get some more accurate costings done on at least some basis of design. Now, if you do have a budget constraint or you do have some funding constraints, tell them so that they can give you feedback and align the design, because you don't want this to happen where they start off with something super slick, and then as you run out of money, you end up with something pretty poor at the end. So I like that meme just to kind of cover that part off. So please share it, because you can always value manage things out as you go on. Step 3, get an estimate done. Use a quantity surveyor, use an estimator, whatever you want to call them, to get line by line costs of your budget, because then you can see where the big costs are, make a decision on whether you want to include them or not. Step 4, do your research. So you can actually go out and get real quotes to validate some of these estimates if you want to. So get real quotes for equipment that you might want to buy, furniture, other fittings. Maybe you can talk to a contractor and get an idea of recent projects that they've done, so you can get a bit of a feel for the market. So using that historical data will also benefit you in getting accuracy for things that maybe you can't quote. Step 5, identify contingency. The super lazy method is just to tack on like 10 or 20% to whatever the budget is. I prefer, the better way is to don't just plan for the unexpected, but actually put effort into thinking about what those unexpected risks might be, known or unknown, and put a dollar against it. So think, what is the risk that might occur on this project, and what might the cost impact be if that risk does occur, and put all those risks into a risk register. And then that will ensure that there's, to the best of your ability, a no surprises cost blowout situation when you get to the construction stage. Final step 6, review and approve. This is where you need to present the budget to stakeholders for feedback and sign off. I recommend setting expectations with your clients or with your stakeholders to do this in the staged manner. So at project start, you're not asking for all of the money to complete the construction. You're just asking for the budget for the first stage, which in our case here, using the life cycle I had earlier, just the planning stage. So we need XX dollars just to complete the planning stage only. When that's done, we'll present to you the cost for the next stage. So getting agreement to spend that small amount of money is a lot easier than getting money for the whole project. And I probably would not recommend that anyway. So once you close out project start, you then move into the next phase, the planning phase. Do your planning phase activities and then get approval for the next stage, which is the design and the procurement stage. Similarly, close out planning, move in to the design and procurement stage. But the difference here is that you'll follow the same process, but at the end of the design and construction stage, you'll actually have real quotes or real estimates from contractors to complete the work, and you'll get approval to proceed to the construction stage, getting both the contingency budget and the construction budget approved in one go so you can complete the project. So yeah, close out design and procurement, move into construction, and you're away. Now, how to track all this? There's a lot of moving parts, and so costs can creep up quickly, leading to delays and other disasters, potentially even jobs. So proper monitoring systems are really going to be helpful, but also they'll power all the reports that you need, so you do look like a pro with your reporting. And the key consideration here is that now that we've actually got a budget that's signed and approved, we then need to track how it's going against that budget with real world commitments, changes, risks, expenditure against it. So the magic formula is budget minus the forecast at completion. So here's what the budget is. Here's what we're expecting the project to cost at the very, very end. This is the difference. We call that the variance. So if your budget is 100,000 and you're estimating the total cost to be 120 at the end, you're 20,000 over budget. What is the forecast to completion? Or sometimes you might hear people call this the estimate at completion or total cost at completion. That is simply committed costs, what you've approved and signed so far, and then the uncommitted costs. So it kind of looks a bit like this. You have your budget, and then underneath that you have these uncommitted costs, which are estimates, forecasts of scope, risks, and then you have your committed costs, which are your contracts that you've signed, change orders that you've signed, and payments. All of those things need to go under a budget and report against that budget. And those collectively, all of these equals your final forecast cost or your total cost at completion. And then you have payments which are made, against contracts and variations. So what to include then in each of these items? Forecasts, allowances for scope inclusions. Maybe you haven't included some scope, but you're thinking about adding it in, list it out. Risks, like we talked about earlier, list out all the risks, cost all the risks, so that you have a really good coverage for what those impacts might be. Contracts, all the contracts you've signed for contractors, subcontractors, materials, equipment, variations or change orders in America, and then of course payments against contracts and variations. And how do you bring all this together? Well, let's switch over to Mastt for a moment, and we will go into our cost ledger. Cool. So I've got my budget structure set up here: planning, design, construction and closeout I've got in one budget, and then I have contingency at the bottom. Along the top I have my budget, my original amounts for the contract, variations, because currently in Australia, but in America that's change orders, which gives you your current commitments, uncommitted amounts, so all the forecasts, the risks, pending things that are not signed, not committed, and then you have your final forecast cost, or in other countries, estimate of completion, total cost of completion, and your variance to budget. So how does this table work? Well, underneath the budget, like we talked about, you have different commitments for architects, general contractors. They may also have, I'm just going to move myself out of the way, they may also have, variations against those contracts. And then maybe under contingency, we might have some risks or some other forecasts as well. And so this rolls all that data up to give you an accurate final forecast cost position and variance to that budget. So let's head back. Moving on to budget metrics. These are my key must-have top 12 do or die metrics that you need to be reporting for your project. So I won't go through them all. We just covered a few when we were looking at the software, but you want to have your budgets, any changes to the budgets, to give you your current budgets, all the way through those commitments, and then of course all the way through the payment status. And here's a neat way that I think is a cool way to visualize it with your budget and then your final forecast cost bar broken down by composition, variance. That's the simplest way, I think, to report on any capital project, the budget. Cool. All right, moving on to reporting. Only 4 key steps here. It's pretty simple. You want to think about who are you reporting to? The board, execs, committee, stakeholders. What's the purpose of the report for them? Status update, financial. Maybe it's just passing it on to others. Identify what questions they need, and then have a think about how you might answer those questions with the report. So if they want to know how much have we spent to date, how can you present information to answer that question? And you'll prepare a report that answers these questions. Here's an example budget report. So this might be for project committee. We'll go into Mastt and check it out. What is it? It's the overall status and it answers key questions like the project budget list, spent to date, committed. You can download a free copy at this link. There's another cash flow report. But ultimately, we want to see live dashboard goodness. So we'll head into our dashboard module. Let's go to budget report or a pre-prepared one here. And this is just a super simple budget report with that awesome chart reporting neatly and accurately the budget. Got a few big number tiles here. You can move these around if you need to, just so it looks nice. I've colored them in a way that it matches the chart here, and that builds, association with the viewers, with the readers. Even the table beneath, I've got the same orange on the budgets that I do here on the report. Maybe you want to close some of this up, decide how much you want to reveal, hide columns, show columns, and you can PDF this exactly to one beautifully neat page and then distribute this to your client or stakeholders if you need to. So I would say that is a 10 out of 10 high quality, accurate budget report that hits all the key metrics and answers all the key questions for stakeholders on a capital project or a construction project. So that would be what I consider top notch, 10 out of 10. Cool, let's head back. We will wrap it up. So final tips and resources. Again, complete template library here at Mastt.com. Check out all these dashboard resources if you need to. And if you thought this was useful, please subscribe to Mastt.com. And if you want to know anything about budgeting or capital projects or just project delivery in general, email me, doug.vincent@mastt.com, and I'll do my best to help. Cool, cheers guys.